True crime threads, a deadly affair unfolds. In a bustling city, Officer Lisa Martin, a dedicated and driven black policewoman, navigated the challenges of her job with professionalism. She had always prided herself on her ability to stay focused, whether she was patrolling the streets or working on complex investigations. Lisa's reputation as a reliable and capable officer had earned her respect in the force. But beyond her professional persona, there were parts of her life that remained hidden, buried deep beneath the surface. She had spent years building a strong, unshakable career, but there were moments when she yearned for something more. Her partner, Detective Jasmine Carter, was a close friend, and together they made an exceptional team. Jasmine was intelligent, strong, and fiercely loyal, qualities that Lisa admired greatly. They had spent countless hours together, working side by side in high-pressure situations, and their bond had grown beyond the confines of their jobs. They confided in each other, sharing their dreams, fears, and challenges. Lisa trusted Jasmine more than anyone else in her life, and the two had become inseparable. But everything changed the night Lisa met Jasmine's husband, Gregory Carter. Gregory was a successful lawyer, a charismatic man with an air of confidence that seemed to draw people in. Lisa had seen him at various events before, but it wasn't until the police gala one evening that their paths truly crossed. The attraction between them was immediate, and it wasn't just physical. Gregory exuded a charm and warmth that Lisa found impossible to resist. They struck up a conversation that lasted far longer than either of them expected, and by the time the night ended, Lisa was already thinking about him in a way she hadn't anticipated. Over the next few weeks, Lisa and Gregory's interactions grew more frequent. They began meeting outside of work, at first under the guise of casual conversations, but soon it became clear that their connection was much deeper. They shared meals, drinks, and long discussions that stretched into the early hours of the morning. Lisa found herself captivated by Gregory's intellect, his humor, and his vulnerability. For his part, Gregory was drawn to Lisa's strength and independence. He admired her dedication to her job and the way she carried herself with such confidence. Though Lisa was well aware of the boundaries she was crossing, she couldn't stop herself. The attraction she felt for Gregory was powerful, and each moment they spent together only made it harder to ignore. She knew that what they were doing was dangerous, that the consequences of their actions could be severe, but in those moments with him, the world seemed to fade away. Gregory, too, felt the pull between them and couldn't deny that he was falling for Lisa, even though he was already married to Jasmine. As the months went by, the affair between Lisa and Gregory became harder to ignore. What had started as innocent conversations and shared moments quickly evolved into something much more intense. They couldn't stay away from each other, and their secret meetings grew more frequent, taking on a life of their own. Lisa tried to focus on her work, but every time she saw Gregory, her heart would race, and all her thoughts would drift to him. Gregory, too, found himself in the same trap. He loved his wife, Jasmine, but the pull he felt for Lisa was undeniable. The affair was exciting in the beginning, filled with passion and the thrill of secrecy. But as time went on, the weight of what they were doing began to take its toll on both of them. Lisa couldn't shake the feeling of guilt that gnawed at her every time she looked at Jasmine, who had always been more than just a colleague. She was a friend, a partner, someone Lisa had admired deeply. The thought of betraying her trust haunted Lisa, but the connection she shared with Gregory made it impossible to walk away. Gregory's marriage, on the surface, seemed perfect. Jasmine was a successful detective, and they were the golden couple everyone admired. But behind closed doors, their relationship was strained. Gregory's increasing distance wasn't unnoticed by Jasmine, though she couldn't pinpoint the cause. She began to feel the subtle shifts in their marriage: the long hours at work, the late-night meetings, and Gregory's growing irritability. He no longer seemed to have the same warmth and affection for her, and she struggled to understand why. There were no obvious signs of infidelity, but the changes were enough to make her suspicious. Still, Jasmine didn't have the evidence to confront Gregory. She trusted him, or at least she wanted to. It wasn't until one late evening when Gregory came home later than usual that she began to question everything. He had been distant all day, distracted and restless, and Jasmine could feel the tension between them like never before. Little did she know, the cause of her husband's behavior was the very woman she considered a close friend, Lisa. Lisa, too, could feel the strain. She had been caught in a web of guilt and desire, and each day it became harder to continue the affair. She knew that their secret would eventually come out, but the risk only seemed to make their stolen moments more exhilarating. Despite the turmoil she was experiencing internally, she couldn't let go of Gregory. Every time they were together, she felt alive, and the world outside of their bubble faded into the background. But the danger of it all was starting to catch up with them. Both Lisa and Gregory were walking a fine line, knowing that one wrong move could expose everything. One night, everything changed. Jasmine accidentally overheard a conversation between Lisa and Gregory. It wasn't intentional, but the words she caught were unmistakable, and they shattered everything she thought she knew about her life. She had been walking through the hallway of their home when she heard hushed voices coming from the living room. The conversation was soft, almost like a whisper, but Jasmine's sharp instincts told her something was off. Her heart sank as she listened, trying to make sense of the fragments of words she could hear. The mix of emotions that flooded over her: betrayal, hurt, confusion, was overwhelming. The faint whispers confirmed her worst fear. Her husband, Gregory, and her partner, Lisa, were more than just friends or colleagues. They were having an affair. Jasmine's world came crashing down in that moment. She had always trusted both of them implicitly, but now she was faced with a painful truth she hadn't seen coming. She knew then that everything had changed. The next morning, with a heavy heart, Jasmine confronted Lisa. There was no more pretending, no more avoidance. Jasmine's voice shook with emotion, but there was no mistaking the hurt in her words. She demanded the truth, and Lisa could do nothing but confirm it. The guilt in Lisa's eyes was evident, but it offered no comfort. The weight of her actions had caught up with her, and the truth was now out in the open. She tried to justify her feelings for Gregory, explaining the connection they had, but Jasmine wasn't listening. The bond they had once shared, both as partners at work and as friends, was now irreparably broken. For Jasmine, the devastation was almost too much to bear. She had trusted Lisa with her life and career, and now that trust was shattered. Her anger was overwhelming, but she also felt a deep sadness. It wasn't just that her husband had betrayed her, it was the realization that Lisa, the woman she had worked beside every day, had known all along and had kept this secret from her. The betrayal was twofold, and the pain was unbearable. But as much as her emotions screamed for revenge, Jasmine couldn't help but feel a sense of helplessness. What could she do now? The damage had already been done, and there was no going back. Gregory, meanwhile, was oblivious to the fact that Jasmine had overheard everything. He had become increasingly fearful as the affair continued, knowing that it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. But nothing could have prepared him for the storm that was about to hit. When Jasmine confronted him that night, all of the tension and guilt that had been building in him for months finally exploded. His world, too, was crumbling, and he had no idea how to fix it. The consequences of their actions were now undeniable, and there was no escape from the fallout. As tensions escalated, Lisa and Gregory found themselves on opposite sides. The guilt and fear that had once united them now drove a wedge between them. Gregory tried to salvage his marriage, but the damage was too deep. Jasmine's confrontation had left him shaken, and though he wanted to fix things, he knew he had betrayed her in the worst possible way. He couldn't erase the truth, and every attempt to pretend everything was fine only seemed to drive Jasmine further away. The distance between them grew wider, and with it, Gregory's sense of desperation. He began to question his choices, torn between the love he had once had for his wife and the undeniable connection he felt for Lisa. Lisa, on the other hand, struggled with the reality of what had happened. The affair had started out of passion and excitement, but now it felt like a heavy burden she could no longer bear. Her career was at risk, and she could sense that the walls were closing in around her. The secrecy that once felt thrilling had turned suffocating, and Lisa began to wonder how much longer she could continue living this double life. The weight of her actions pressed down on her constantly, and though she tried to keep things going with Gregory, it was clear they were both drowning in the aftermath of their betrayal. Despite their shared sense of dread, neither of them could bring themselves to end things. Each encounter with Gregory felt like a final desperate attempt to hold on to something that was slipping away. Yet with every stolen moment, the truth loomed larger. Jasmine's suspicions had been confirmed, and Lisa knew that sooner or later, the consequences would be unavoidable. She had already destroyed the trust between herself and her partner, and now she feared the impact on her entire life. The fear of being caught was no longer just a possibility, it felt like an inevitable reality. One fateful evening, as the situation reached a boiling point, everything unraveled. Gregory, overwhelmed with guilt and fear, found himself at a breaking point. The pressure of the affair, the strain on his marriage, and the constant lies had built up to a point where he could no longer handle it. But the conversation between him and Lisa that evening was unlike any before. Desperation, confusion, and a sense of finality hung in the air. It was no longer just about passion or desire, it was about survival. Gregory's mind raced, and in a moment of panic he made a choice that would forever alter their lives. In that split second, everything changed. What had started as a complicated love affair ended in a deadly act. The chain of events that followed spiraled out of control, and in a moment of reckless decision-making, the situation turned irreversible. The weight of the choices they had made caught up with them, leading to a tragic and irreversible outcome. The deadly choice would haunt them all, leaving everyone to grapple with the consequences of what had happened. The news spread quickly, and the city was in shock. Lisa Martin, once a respected and promising officer, now found herself at the center of a tragic and public scandal. Gregory Carter's death had shocked the community, and the details surrounding his death only made the situation more complex and heartbreaking. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that what had appeared to be a senseless tragedy was far more complicated. Lisa was arrested, and the charges against her were severe: murder, betrayal, deception. The life she had built as an officer and the trust she had earned from her colleagues all seemed to collapse in an instant. Jasmine, meanwhile, was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. Her marriage had been destroyed, not just by her husband's infidelity but by the woman she had trusted most. The betrayal left her emotionally broken, but there was no time for grief. She was thrust into the center of a media frenzy, her every move scrutinized by the public. She had to face the reality that the woman who had once been her partner in law enforcement and her friend was responsible for the death of her husband. Jasmine struggled with the mixture of anger, sadness, and confusion that gripped her heart. She had been so sure of her friendship with Lisa, so confident in her loyalty, only to have it all turn out to be a lie. The trial became a spectacle, with every detail of the affair and the tragic events that followed laid bare for all to see. The prosecution painted a damning picture of Lisa, showing how her affair with Gregory had spiraled out of control, leading to his death in a moment of desperation. Lisa's defense was that she had been caught in a web of emotions and fear, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. The affair, the lies, and the choices they made all pointed to a tragic conclusion. Lisa's actions, in the heat of the moment, had led to Gregory's death, and now she had to face the consequences. The courtroom was filled with tension as the final verdict was read. Lisa was convicted of murder, and the sentence that followed was as tragic as the events that had led to it. Her life, once filled with promise, was now defined by the choices she had made. For Jasmine, there was no victory in the verdict. She had lost both her husband and her best friend in one fell swoop. The grief and betrayal were too much to bear, and the emotional scars would last a lifetime. In the end, the story of Lisa, Gregory, and Jasmine served as a painful reminder of the dangers of crossing boundaries. The affair, once fueled by passion and desire, had ultimately destroyed everything in its path. The death of Gregory was the culmination of a series of choices made by those who had once been so close, and the fallout from those decisions would leave an indelible mark on everyone involved. The tragedy was a lesson in the cost of betrayal, love, and the irreversible consequences of one moment's decision.